So hello and welcome to this class where we'll be exploring the familiar and the unfamiliar. And I've called this class What's Possible? And I want us to sort of think about all of the things that we do out of habit and that we label right or correct, or if we're not doing it that it's wrong or misaligned, and just be open to the unknown and what's possible when we start to explore in asana different ways of practicing. So for example, if you come to sit on your mat like I'm doing, I'm noticing now that what I've done is I've sat in a familiar cross-legged position, and usually we have a more comfortable side that we sit. So however you sit, then just change the cross of the legs to the opposite one in front, and it all automatically starts to feel a little bit sort of peculiar and unfamiliar and unknown. It's not our usual, and that's fine. We're learning to sit with that today. And likewise then, just interlacing the fingers. And you'll find the same thing, that usually we sort of like have one thumb on top of the other and we interlace them in a familiar way. And if we were to switch, so if you switch your hands now so that the other thumb is on top and you've changed the whole cross of the fingers, that now for me it feels a little bit odd, a bit peculiar, a bit weird, yeah? Because it's unfamiliar, it's unknown, or it's not the usual. So then what we're going to do is just keep switching from the familiar to the unfamiliar. And if you want to coordinate your breath, you could inhale on one and exhale on the other, that's fine. But just keep going from one to the other. And the only reason that it is unfamiliar or that we have these patterns is because we keep doing them. So we keep practicing them. So if we keep practicing something unfamiliar, it becomes familiar over time. And if we keep switching, then your brain starts to rewire. And then after a while, you might start to think or find that one doesn't feel so odd or peculiar anymore. Yeah? So by now, like, my brain's going, okay, they both feel a bit familiar and I can't quite remember which one is the one that I'm usually doing, which one's not. Your experience might be different. Yeah? And for example, if we were then to cross the arms or fold the arms, and there's many different ways that you can do all of these things. You don't have to watch what I'm doing or copy what I'm doing, especially as we get more into the class, but I'm just folding my arms as I normally would. And again, there's a certain way in which I fold my arms. So then I'm going to try and switch and cross and have the other one on top. Now this feels a little bit peculiar, and then I'm going to switch back to how I was, and then switch again. And then I'll just keep switching. And for me, like, even the way that I'm switching and changing the arms is kind of the way that I would normally do it. Yeah. So then I'm just going to sort of like change the cross of the arms in a different way. So I'm just sort of shaking my hands out. You might have something different. So I could take the elbows out. I could take the elbows out and switch. Can I? Yeah. And you might be able to take your arms up and then come back and switch, which is a little bit more confusing for my brain because it's not familiar with doing that. And then we can also think about how we've just folded the arms in one particular way. So is there a different way that we could cross the arms? So again, I automatically put the right arm on top, so I'm going to switch. And so we can switch like the way that we're doing something. We can also think about, I can also cross the arms by holding the shoulders, having the elbows forward. And again, the right arm ended up on top. So we can just sort of play around with one. Does one feel more comfortable than the other? Does one arm on top feel more comfortable? Is it my go-to? And then just sort of another one, we can cross the arms like we do in eagle. And again, how you change and uncross the arms and recross them. Can you change the way that you do that? And again, the only reason they're not wrong, or they're not, they're uncomfortable, some of them, because we don't practice them. And the more that we practice them, the more familiar they become. So we're rewiring, and most of our body and our behavior is all patterns. And my argument here is that sometimes we just formulate new patterns in yoga or in asana. Okay, so then after that, we're just going to come and lie down on your mat. Up to you if you want your legs stretched out, or your knees bent and soles of the feet on the floor. And close the eyes, chin lightly tucked towards the chest, and just notice your breath. The invitation is to breathe in and out through your nose if possible. And I'm just aware of my hands tingling, my arms have got sort of odd sensations, so as my shoulders, my breath's a little bit slightly raised in tempo. And that's probably because I've been challenging my brain. And what happens when we do that and challenge the body and our behavioural patterns is that we're making new neurological networks. So just what does that feel like to be doing that? And then if your legs are straight or bent, there is no right or wrong way of doing this. Cross your legs. So one leg is crossed over the other. And again, I'm just noticing which way I've done it. I've put the right leg on top. My legs were bent, so I crossed them like that. Yours really don't have to be the same. But notice which leg is on top of the other, and then just switch it over so that the other leg is on top. Notice if one feels a bit more uncomfortable to the other, and then just keep switching. And again, if you want to inhale in one position and exhale the other, or you want to inhale and uncross and then exhale and cross, that's absolutely fine. And just go side to side, crossing and uncrossing, until the brain starts to, or the movement or the cross starts to feel a little bit more familiar. And your sort of brain's going, I can't remember which one I started with, and they're both starting to feel a bit more the same. And then like we did with the cross of the arms, there's multiple ways in which we can cross the legs. So I'm going to invite you to then think of a different way of crossing the legs. So I've got one leg straight, one leg bent. You might have both legs straight or both legs bent. And then I'm noticing I put right leg on top again, so I'm just switching and switching. And if you're doing something different to what I'm doing, that's perfectly fine. Hopefully this sort of starts to get your creativity and your choices of creativity sort of flowing. And then is there a different way that you can cross your legs? And then just switch from side to side. And so there's different ways we can cross, whichever right is on top of left or left is on top of right, which also makes me think about we have a right side of the brain and a left side of the brain. You could also be changing how you cross the legs. So rather than just the familiar way, can you find a new and exciting way to change the cross of the legs? And then you might also be experimenting with, there's different ways that I can have one leg on top of the other. So I'm changing the cross, changing how I cross and uncross. And I'm just sort of like thinking, how many ways can I cross the legs? And, does one side dominate all the time? Or are they pretty much the same? Okay, and then I'm going to add the arms. So we're going to cross the legs and cross the arms at the same time. So that's interesting. This time my left arm is on top of the right, even though my right leg is on top of the left. And then I'm going to switch. And then I'm going to switch. And now we have, because we've got two different things going on, we could keep the arms the same and change the way that we're crossing the legs. And then we could also cross the arms and the legs in different ways. Very confusing. So we can also then change the tempo. So you might switch the legs a couple of times, but then change the cross of the arms once. And again, can you sort of like make it really confusing for the brain as to what it is that you're doing? You might be doing like a different movement for the arms as you are to the legs, like the legs might be staying familiar, or you might be sort of changing the cross and left to right. I'm confused myself now, so then I'm just going to stop and come and lie down on the floor. Close my eyes and notice what emotions are coming up. Notice what my mind is doing. Is it confused? Is it excited? Is it scared of the unknown? Is it scared of change? Is it scared of these new possibilities? Is the fact that there may be multiple ways in which we can move, like, confusing for the brain? It's like, no, there's just one alignment. There are many different alignments and many different possibilities and different ways to practice each posture and how we move. Okay, so from there, I'm going to ask you to bend your knees and bring the soles of the feet to the floor. So now if I was to ask you to roll over and come up to sit, is there a familiar way that you would do it, a habit way? Yeah? So you might roll to the right. That might be because you've been told to do that, or it might be just because that's the way you do it, or because you've never really thought about it. So however you would roll up, or some people hug their knees in and rock up, yeah. If you do that, do you cross one leg in front of the other? I usually roll to the right, so I'm deliberately going to roll to the left, which feels odd, and then push myself up the other way. Yeah. So now we're on hands and knees. Yeah, so come on to hands and knee position. So we've got our regular cat and cow position, or poses, where we're inhaling. Usually we lift the chest and the tailbone goes back, and then as we exhale, we round the spine so the chin goes towards the chest and the tailbone tucks under. Now, for us, yeah, we may have been told, or we may just be sort of like getting used to that there is a right and wrong. So we have the hands underneath the shoulders and the knees underneath the hips. But let's just challenge ourselves by having one hand forward. I'm going to have the opposite knee back, but you can have the same knee back if you wanted to. And let's try and sort of explore cat and cow, the arching and the rounding of the spine in that arm and leg configuration. So it's not wrong. You're not going to damage your body by doing this. It's going to be unfamiliar, so your body is going to have to work it out and create new neural pathways, and it will also have new sensations because it's rewiring. Whenever you did switch to the other side, just to sort of give it a little bit of a balanced feel to the body, and again, one side might feel more dominant or more familiar, and feels completely different on this side to the other. But after a while, if I practice this all the time, if your first yoga class, your teacher told you to do this, it would feel completely normal. It would feel completely familiar. It would just feel like this is how we practice cat and cow. It's only because we've been conditioned to think and form patterns in our body. So then what else can we do? Yeah, we can change the position of the hands, like I could have the fingertips out, I could have them wider than the mat, and I could feel what cat and cow feels like doing it that way. I could also combine that with having one leg forward or one leg straight and one leg bent. And I can switch. I could also then, think about having the hands like both hands towards the right side of the mat and both hands towards the left side of the mat. So I'm adding a sort of side bend to the cat and cow. And there's multiple things you can do. In other classes I've used blocks, so you can have one hand on a block, one hand not on a block. You can have one knee on a block. And so there's different ways, and your body's just getting stronger and more familiar with all these different possibilities. So a lot of the time we kind of don't like change. It's sort of scary for the body. So we're encouraging change and trying to become curious and excited. From there, we're going to tuck the toes under and push back into downward facing dog. And I guarantee when you come into downward facing dog, there is a fidget pattern that you have. Yeah, some people bend one knee than the other, and some other people I see swaying the hips from side to side. So we tend to always fidget in the same places. So for me, I always fidget the feet, but I don't really fidget the hands and the arms. So I'm going to sort of like lift one hand up and then the other. That feels really weird for me. So I don't do it, and now it feels all right because I am doing it. And then I was thinking, well, I wiggle my hips side to side, but I never shrug the shoulders. So can I then try and shrug the shoulders a little bit, one direction and then the other? And like I could have both hands turning out, I could have both hands turning in, could have fingertips pointing forward or back, I could have one hand doing one thing and the other hand doing another. Again, I'm just sort of opening myself up to possibilities. And then I'm going to walk the hands back towards my feet into Uttanasana, standing forward fold. Now again, there's a habitual way that we do this usually. So we're just going to sort of like change it up a little bit. So I'm going to bring the right foot towards the centre of the mat and across the left leg behind the right foot. So I'm picking up and bringing it next to the right foot. It's not perfectly toes in line with toes. And this feels weird for me because I don't often do it. Might feel all right for you because you do it more often than I do. Yeah? And so then I'm going to switch. I'm going to bring my left foot next to my right foot and take the right foot behind the left foot and over towards that left side. This one feels a little bit more comfortable. Don't know why that is. I guess because one hip might be different to the other. And then I'm going to switch. So I'm going to go back to right foot being on the floor, left foot stepping behind the right foot. Being with that feels more comfortable the second time around, feels a little bit more familiar. And then switching again, left foot in the centre, right foot steps behind and over to the left. Breathing, yeah. So I've only done this twice, I'm going to do it one more time. So on the third time, is it starting to feel more? It's not so scary, it's not so unusual. Body's getting used to it, my brain's working out how to do it. That's great. Definitely calming my nervous system down a bit by breathing in and out through the nose, telling me it's okay. And then back to the familiar, the regular standing forward fold. And as part of me then goes, thank goodness. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's better. Because it's the known. But it's also stopping me from trying new things. It's stopping me from being creative. It's stopping me from opening my mind and my body to new possibilities. So let's walk the hands forward back into downward facing dog. I'm then just going to lower my knees to the floor and just rest my bum towards my heels in child pose. And just take a few moments just to close the eyes. I'm resting my head on the floor, my forehead on the hands. You don't have to, you could just be resting it on the floor. But I'm just observing, what does it feel like to be giving myself permission to explore new possibilities, to explore change, to explore creativity, to let go of the fact that there are rules and regulations, noticing what emotions and feelings arise because I'm practicing this way. And then lifting the head off the hands, I'm coming up onto all fours again. And then for a change, I'm going to turn fingertips out to the side, take the hands nice and wide, and then tuck the toes under and press back into downward facing dog that way. And then, what happens if I turn the toes out and the heels in? What happens if I bend the knees in that position? And it doesn't feel like I've ever done downward dog like that before. And then what happens if the opposite happens, if the toes turn in and the heels go out? The body's going to get strong in multiple ways if we practice the poses in multiple ways. Yeah. Okay. From there, I'm just going to move my hands and my feet back to more of a regular downward facing dog, more of a familiar one. And I'm going to press down through the left left big toe spine and lift the right leg up towards the ceiling. Now, with the right leg lifted, can I bend the left knee and hop that left foot to the centre of the mat? And I'm going to cross that right foot behind the left foot. So now I'm in sort of like that cross-legged downward facing dog, similar to what we did in Uttanasana. And from there, I'm just going to transition forward into plank and downward facing dog, keeping the legs in that configuration, which feels odd. The first time it felt very odd for me. Yeah? I'm also trying to keep my toes in contact with the floor, possibly even the ball in contact with the floor, ball of the foot in contact with the floor. And just see, I'm going to do 3, you could do 4 or 5, depending on how fast you're moving and how fast you're breathing. I'm exhaling into plank and inhaling into downward dog. You could do the opposite. So this is my fourth one. And by now it doesn't feel as unfamiliar as it did before. And then I'm uncrossing the legs, coming back to more of a regular downward facing dog. Then pressing the right big toe down, lifting the left leg up, bending the right knee and hopping that right foot towards the centre, crossing that left foot behind the right foot and over to the right. And then again, I'm just going to transition 3 or 4 times from plank with the legs in that cross configuration and back into downward facing dog. And again, if you wanted to do a different hand position or you wanted to add a push-up or something, you're welcome to. How can we add change and challenge to our regular asanas? And then that's 4, so I'm uncrossing that left leg, bringing it back to more of a familiar downward dog. I'm going to take my feet a little bit wider and turn the toes out, bend the knees, I quite like that. And then bring the knees back down towards the floor and rest the bum towards the heels in child pose. You could also rest the bum towards the heels and sit up if you prefer that to child pose. That's also fine. And so we have been taught and we've been educated that there is one way of doing an asana, one way of doing a pose, but that's untrue. No, there are multiple ways in which we can practice them. And also there might be a part of you saying, but is that safe? And it is safe, but you have to think about and remember that if it's an unfamiliar way, your body won't have done it as much as the familiar way. So you go cautiously and go slowly because your body has to rewire to get used to it. But over time, it can become just as strong in these new ways as it was in the familiar ways. Okay, from there, let's come back up onto hands and knees, pressing back into downward facing dog. And then stepping your right foot forward between your hands. Actually, no, do you know what we'll do? We'll walk the feet forward towards your hands. So we're standing at the front of the mat this time into your forward fold. And then let's take the right foot and the left foot together. Let's keep the right foot where it is and step the left foot behind the right foot and over to the right, back into that sort of cross-legged forward fold. And then switching to the other side. And I have to say this time, does feel a little bit more familiar. And it reminds me of the first time, like I ever went to a yoga class and none of the poses were familiar. And my body was just sort of going, what is going on here? But then after a while, it could have been a couple of months, or it could have been a few years, like when downward dog starts to get comfortable, or you start sort of knowing what the poses look like and feel like, and you start assuming that, everything is okay, but really we've just become familiar with those new patterns. So here we're just trying to, as you keep switching, become comfortable with even more variations and more possibilities. Okay, and then back to more of a familiar Uttanasana. And then what I want you to do, I'm not going to tell you which one, is to step one foot back towards the back of your mat into a lunge. And then notice which foot you step back. That's probably your familiar one. And then step forward again towards the front of your mat. And then stepping back with the other foot and just noticing if that feels a little bit more unfamiliar. Pausing there in your lunge and then stepping the other foot back into downward facing dog. And notice if you've gone into your ordinary, regular downward facing dog, I'm going to turn toes to one side, heels to the other, and then switch and go to the other side. So I'm just sort of like giving my body permission to explore. Now let's step the right foot forward towards the hands or between the hands, and making sure that you feel sort of grounded and safe and sort of stable in the foot. So ground through the big toes, that will help and push down. And then can you lift the hands up off the floor and come up into a high lunge. So from here, we're going to add the cross of the arms. So we're going to reach the arms up towards the ceiling, Turn the palms out to the sides and then cross the forearms or wrists and bring the palms together. So I've done that in a sort of like probably my easiest side. It's also challenging my balance to do it because it's not a familiar way I would practice a lunge, and I'm going to change the cross. And so for this side, it feels a little bit awkward, so I'm just going to switch from the one to the other. And again, you might be breathing, and coordinating your breath with the movement, with the cross of the arms. You might not. Good. And they're starting to become a little bit more familiar. The one is definitely a lot different to the other for me in my shoulder. One affects my balance more than the other, so I'm just sort of noting that. And after I've done that another couple of times, I'm then going to just have the palms facing each other with the fingertips reaching up, the familiar, and then the hands down and stepping back, downward facing dog. Just once, I'm then going to lift my left foot up towards the ceiling, hop my right foot towards the centre, cross the left foot behind the right foot, and then coming forward into plank, back into downward facing dog, which is already feeling a little bit more familiar. Let's leave the other side. We'll do it on the next time round. So then left foot steps forward, right foot finds the floor, pressing down so I'm feeling stable, enough to lift the hands up off the floor and coming up into a high lunge. If the feet need to move to become more stable, that's fine. Pressing down through the feet, particularly the big toes, arms reach up, palms turn out to the side, crossing the wrists or the forearms and bringing the palms together. And again, I went onto my easy side, so I'm going to switch. My brain hasn't yet wired. Your brain might be rewiring it. I always do that side first, so I'm going to try and do the other side first. Sometimes my brain does, other times it's not. Today it's not. It's just going for the easy option. Probably because I'm having to talk at the same time. So switching. I'm looking for changes. I'm looking for that familiarity. I'm looking for how it's making me feel. It makes me feel a little bit wobbly, a little bit out of balance with all this change. That's fine. It's helping me get used to it. And then we'll do 2 more. And then palms face each other, arms reach up, familiar lunge, and then hands down, stepping back. Some form of downward facing dog. I'm going to have one hand forward, one foot back, just to see what that feels like. And then more of a regular downward facing dog. And then this time, we've got left foot pressing down, right leg lifts, left knee bends, hop the left foot towards the centre, right foot comes behind the left foot, and then plank, and then downward facing dog. And then back to more of a regular downward facing dog, knees to floor, bum towards the heels, rest for a moment. And again, you can either rest in child or you could find a variation of child. Sometimes people, like for me, I always have the arms forward or my head resting on the hands. Other people have their arms down by the side, by their feet, and sort of rest here. So you could try a new variation, you could try a new way of doing it. I'm just noticing what's arising for you with all of this change, with all of this new stuff. And whatever's there, just acknowledge it. Just notice it, just sit with it. It's fine. Okay, and then come back up onto your hands and knees. Let's come to sit, but before we do, notice that I was thinking how would you normally come to sit? So for me, probably what I'd do is I'd slide the knees in, I'd roll to, I think I'd go to the left side and then I'd come to sit that way. So I'm deliberately going to go to the other side. So I'm going to try and roll to the right side. That's definitely not the way I normally do it. I'm going to move my hands to help me and then come in to sit.
So I'm just sort of noticing those patterns now and trying to deliberately pay more attention to them and challenge them. So let's sit down on our sit bones. We're going to try boat pose. So I'm going to lift the feet up to you if you want to practice with straight legs. I'm not. I'm just going to keep the knees bent, shins parallel to the floor, reach the arms out, and then I'm going to cross the arms like I just did, palms facing each other, and then switch. I think that time I actually did the one that was unfamiliar first. Good. And then what I'm going to try and do is to add a twist. I'm going to twist to the right, and then back to center, and then twist to the left, and then back to center, and then can I discoordinate how I'm crossing the arms with when I'm twisting the torso. So I'm doing about 2 arm swaps to a twist. But then even that's forming a pattern, so I'm going to try and make it even more irregular. And just breathing in and out through the nose. And then that's enough. I'm going to bring the heels to the floor and then come and lie down on my back. Palms face up, very confused. But also I can feel all these tingles or this sort of sensation buzzing through the body, which perhaps is that neural, those new neural pathways being formed. And your body also might be, or your mind might be saying, but I need to do something else now to bring it back into balance, or to, to bring it back to the familiar. But in theory, in scientific theory, there is no reason for us to do that. The more that we sit in this unknown realm, this realm of new possibility, and the less familiar, the more we just get used to it and accept it, and it becomes more and more familiar. So then, have your feet about hip distance apart, or a little bit wider, or a little bit closer together, or non-habitual feet distance here. I'd just like you to windscreen wiper the legs. Yeah. So usually by that we roll the thighs in and out. Now there's 2 ways that we could have done this. I went for toes in, both toes in and both toes out. Also from that same instruction, you could have also done both toes to the right and then both toes to the left. And then noticing your breath. Have you gone inhale in one direction, exhale to the other? And I'm just switching then from doing the windscreen wipers of toes in, toes out, to toes both side and then the other. I'm just getting used to those 2 different ways in which that can happen. One definitely feels more familiar than the other. Okay, and then relax. Take a breath in and breath out. Now I'd like you to point and flex the toes. Yeah, so point the toes forward and then push into the heels and spread the toes and pull the toes back. And again, from that instruction, you could have done it in 2 ways. So for me, I'm doing both legs at the same time. I'm pointing both toes forward and then pushing both heels forward, pulling all the toes back. But I could also switch and have one toe pointing forward, the other heel pushing forward, and then switching. So I've got right and left side doing alternate sides. And then can I switch between the 2? So sometimes doing both toes forward, both heels forward, and then sometimes doing opposites. And then relax the legs. So then, is it possible to have one foot pointing and flexing and the other foot doing windscreen wipers? And notice if you've coordinated them, and can you do them in different speeds? So could the windscreen wiper go faster than the pointing and flexing? And we know it confuses it. It is possible, it's just coordination. Feet are doing something really weird. And then can I switch now so that the other leg is pointing and flexing and the other side is windscreen wiping? And how challenging is it for me to just switch to the other side and then switch to the other side and then switch to the other side? And then can you work with switching but also changing tempo? So one might be going faster than the other, and then you can switch over and maybe change the tempo. Good grief, and then I'm just confused. So just relaxing the legs, relaxing the feet, relaxing the arm. Tucking the chin a little bit towards the chest. And noticing your breath and noticing sensation. If you prefer to have your knees bent, your feet on the floor, that's fine also. Remembering that the yoga practice is more than just physical. So there might be physical sensations going on. How does this practice affect your breath, your energy levels? Do you feel excited? Do you feel like tingly? Do you feel like mentally exhausted from having to think of all those different ways and possibilities? And what's happened to your mind? Does it feel more integrated with your body, or does it just feel confused? Has it just sort of like disorientated because of the confusion, or has it switched on? I guarantee if you did this class again, it would probably feel different. Because the brain is always rewiring. And I'll stay here as you go into some form of relaxation. So stay where you are and just close your eyes and just continue watching your breath. And noticing if thoughts arise as to, like this didn't feel like a full practice, or it didn't feel like, like it felt odd, it felt strange, it wasn't what I'm used to. And that's fine because it is new. But also notice if sensation arriving where it's like, wow, that was just a few yoga poses. I wonder what that could open for me with all the other yoga poses that we didn't do variations of. And how is that to sit with this unknown, unlimited realm of possibility? And just allow your space to be, yourself to be in that space of the unknown, of the uncertain. Try and welcome a sense of curiosity over a sense of overwhelm or fear. Can we be comfortable with being curious? As we become more familiar with practicing in the realm or within the realm of what's possible. Just allowing just couple more moments just for your brain to integrate and your nervous system to integrate what we've just done.
to digest the experience of what just happened. And then just allowing your eyes to open and bending your knees and bringing your soles of your feet to the floor. And we're going to end with some bridge poses, yeah? So we're not going to sort of roll over and just come up to sit. We're going to end somehow different. We're going to end unexpectedly. So bridge pose, let's just stick with our regular bridge pose. So just pushing, go how you would normally do, familiar position, feet probably hip distance apart, pressing down through the feet, lifting the bum first and then rolling up the spine, nice and slowly. So we're just feeling the sensation, noticing if the body's saying, but I'm just coming out of Shavasana, why am I doing more asana? And just do 2 or 3. I'm just going to do 2, but if you're working a little bit faster than me, that's fine. Breathing in and out through the nose. And then we're going to change it up. So I'm going to take the feet a little bit wider. I'm going to go as wide as the mat. I'm also going to turn the toes out. So what's it feel like then to do a bridge pose with the leg in that position? Feels different. Feels a bit weird. But obviously I'm not as used to doing it in this way, so I'm going cautiously. I'm feeling and thinking about it, and I'm not sort of just pressing myself up as high as possible. Just checking in, like, do I go as far? I'd rather not go as far and sort of feel more stable. You could also turn the toes in, heels out, toes in, which is going to feel a little bit weird for me. And then I'll do one more like that with toes in, heels out. And then what happens if I bring one heel closer to the buttock and the other foot further away from the buttock? So again, my hips are asymmetrical. And can I press up and roll down with the legs in that position? And noticing there's probably like multiple distances that your feet can be from your buttocks. So it could be that one leg is straight and the other leg is bent, or it could be that like it's gone 2 centimeters from its normal position. It could have gone like 40 centimeters away from its ordinary position. And then I'm just going to switch over and do the other side. Again, one toe could be turned out, one toe could be turned in. So we've also got that to add to it. There's so many different ways that we could practice bridge pose than just the one. We could also have both feet over to the right or both feet over to the left. And you could sort of combine some of these movements. So you can have both feet over to the right, but one leg forward, one leg back. And then the other possibilities that we could do, if we just come back to center, is we could go on the outside edge of the feet, so the little toe side of the feet, and the knees go out a little bit like Baddha Konasana, and kind of roll up the spine cautiously and carefully with the legs in that position. And then we could also have heels pressing down, toes lifting up. And we could also have toes down, heels lifted up. So I'm pushing through the ball of the foot. And that feels completely different now.
And again, just think it, like I've just planted seeds there. You could spend another 20 minutes here, having like 1 foot forward, one on the heel, one on the toe. You can have like feet to the side, one on the outer edge, one on the ball of the foot. There's just unlimited ways and possibilities that we can practice bridge pose. But then just before we come up, I am going to just make you go to the familiar one more time. So just feet how you would normally practice, hip distances apart, and just noticing how it feels. Again, does it feel comforting and sort of safe to practice this way? Or perhaps it sort of starts to feel a bit boring or like, well, that's not very interesting really. When I start thinking about how many other ways there are to practice. And again, whether you're feeling one way or another, it's not right or wrong. You're just observing what you're feeling and asking the questions, what's possible? And if there is a different movement that you want to do now, just to sort of stretch out, or if you feel like you need to twist, or like a new type of twist, or you want to hug your knees in, or there's a different type of back bend you want to do, that's fine. We're letting go of the rules a bit more today. And then if I was to say roll over and come up to sit, I would probably go to the right, so I'm going to deliberately go to the left and press myself up and come to a comfortable seated position. So I usually do right leg in front, so I'm going to do left leg in front. In fact, I'm just going to sit somehow differently. I'm going to just have one leg out straight and the other leg bent. Why not? I'm going to bring my hands towards the centre of the heart, where usually I bring palms together, so I'm going to bring one palm on top of the other. Then I'm going to switch around because I've just come to my familiar place of having one hand on top of the other, so I'm switching. And I'm smiling inside at the end of that practice as to, wow, what else is possible with my yoga asana practice? But you might be feeling something different. Just close the eyes and be with how you feel in this realm of what's possible. As you bow the chin towards the chest, having gratitude for yourself, for your body, your mind, your breath, your emotions, for allowing you to experience whatever it was you experienced in that realm of possibility. And as you open the eyes and lift the chin, bring that feeling into the rest of your day or the rest of your week as to what is possible. And thank you for practicing, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.